Welcome to this week's webinar. I've got the fantastic Diane Hey with me, who's chairperson of the expert pool for beauty, wellbeing and aesthetic professionals, which was formerly the Trailblazer, and represents on behalf of Skills England. Also have your own academy delivering apprenticeships, but we'll touch on that in a minute. But real thing I really want to delve into is learning more about apprenticeships. Thank you, Diane, for joining me today.
It's an absolute pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity.
I think more people need to know about the work you do. More people need to know about employing apprenticeships. I've employed apprenticeships myself, apprentices. I think it's been great fun every time I've done it, and it's just such a way of getting new therapists into the industry and passionate. For employers who are new to apprenticeships, though, can you break down how a beauty apprenticeship actually works in practice, the day-to-day in the business, not just on paper, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of having an apprentice within the business, there are two routes. You will either be a levy-paying employer, so you're paying a percentage of your payroll into a pot that is ring-fenced for apprenticeships only. If you're a non-levy paying employer, and again, there's criteria around that, which we can explain at another time. It won't take too long today. Then your training provider, so somebody who is approved to deliver apprenticeships by government office, would secure your funding for the learning aspect of your apprenticeship, young person or a new entrant to the industry. There is no age cap to an apprentice. But in terms of the day-to-day business, as a provider, we always have a curriculum conversation with the employer to make sure that we're meeting the needs of their business. So all employers use variable brands. They have their own methodologies. They have their own systems and processes. So there's always a period of time where we've got a technical skill that takes time to perfect before they may be working with guests or clients in the workplace arena. However, we have curated closely with our employers that we work with to find ways of enhancing both their income earning status, but also the development of the individual. So they are like the magic people within the business. They do those silent aspects that help the business to run. They learn the business from the ground up, and they're a huge asset to any business operation. Obviously, for those who don't know, we do an awful lot of work within the spa operators world. So there is always activities that an apprentice can learn and contribute to the team. Prior to the technical skills sign off to being in the treatment room, or being on a screen, as we would call it, there are conversations that we have to really specify how we can bring revenue. And they get that revenue generation skill quite early on. So touchless therapies, hosting, retail, client care, customer service. The hosting is really important because that really builds their confidence of dealing with the public, and being able to enthuse guests and clients that are there either for a stay or a day, or and again, with salon operators, we deal with salons also. So there's a list that we would discuss with an employer to identify if we're new to it, does it actually look like? In terms of how the delivery model works, everybody has a different delivery model. We're quite unique in what we do because we are spread over many multiple operations. Some providers will go in to the site. Some providers will have learners out of site. But what there is a commitment from the employer to allow the apprentice what they call off-the-job training time, OTJT, and that's designated by the standard. That's planned into when that young person or apprentice will be seen by the training provider. So it's very much a tripartite relationship. You have the apprentice, again, no age cap, so it can be existing people from the workplace that may be coming from a different department. We've had that, or they may be coming in from a level 2, they may be coming into a level 3. There are challenges coming into a level 3 because the FE provision is slightly different. It doesn't include massage. So it's about the individualization of the curriculum against the standard to meet the business need. And I think growing your own, I've been a fan of apprenticeships. My business has operated. We practice what we preach. We have people who have been apprentices in our business who speak to the apprentices that we're helping in other people's businesses. So, as we've already said, I think if you cut me in half, I'd probably say apprenticeships in the middle, because that has been a real focus of my career. And it's a fantastic way to learn. and it's the confidence and the life skills as well that it gives to people, and particularly if they are a young entrant to the industry, in terms of, you know, managing their own life, their work, their finances, and that sense of achievement when they progress through the program with their key performance indicators. So we're talking to them in the same language that they are being spoken to in the workplace. So it really does work as a three-way arrangement between the employer, the apprentices, and us as the provider.
So they spend a certain element of their week or their time where they are learning, like you say, the technical elements, but in the background, they're also in the spa learning those elements of like the hosting or the retail. So they're automatically able to earn the business money. They're not sat there waiting until they've got a technical element. It's very much in the business from day one. How can you get them immersed and working?
And I think that's been a key change, because everybody kind of thinks, and that was a real important area for us in the design, because obviously you're aware, and you've just confirmed I'm involved in the design of that with numerous, you know, employer contributors around that table, is that we didn't want to wait, and we didn't feel that the industry could afford for somebody to hold the full apprenticeship standard, which would have taken probably 50, 60 weeks, 72 weeks at the time. Things have changed since then. It's a shorter time scale before they could actually use them in the business, as it were, to generate revenue, because they were still having to pay a wage. You know, so again, we have the conversation with our apprentices about, well, where do you think your wages come from? So there's an ownership and an accountability of how a business operates. And what would you want if you were paying out of your purse for somebody to be in a job role? You know, what does that actually look like, and how much do you have to earn to cover your cost to a business? So we look at all of that in the round as well. So in terms of that, it was really important that we had a mechanism where there was earning from day one, but then there was the opportunity to technically threshold sort of competence, sign people off so they could go into the treatment room and then start to build the experience and the career from a technical skill point of view, sort of within that window. So they don't have to wait right until the end of the apprenticeship before they can go into the treatment room. And again, we sit down and we do this regularly with our employers, you know, a week, whatever, are we doing this? Where's this happening? Where do you want our piece? Where do you want your piece? How does that come together? When do they go on screen? And again, we have a regime of, you know, it's signed off, it's insurable, it's safe for the business, it's safe for the apprentice, it's safe for the employer, it's safe for us. Everybody's happy, they're making money, they're progressing. Because at the end of the day, you know, business is there to be a business. We are there to be the educator, and the apprentice is there to be both the learner but also an employee. So the same employment terms apply. So it's complex, but it's if it's well planned and everybody is open and honest, because we are all working as a collective. So it's not us stuck over there and the employer over there and the apprentices somewhere in the middle, moving between the two. It's absolutely co-joined so that everybody benefits in the picture.
So they come and visit you for a part of it. They learn those technical skills, and then that they learn them, practice them, and then it's signed off. They can then go in the treatment room, can't they? That's what
absolutely, and that's insurable. And when we get the sign off, so we do our bit from an educational point of view, because obviously that's structured within the apprenticeship. And there's an underpinning qualification underneath the standard, and that's what allows that insurability. So we will sign off the educational aspects, which will be the knowledge, skills, and behaviours. So yes, we've got the skills, but we actually need to check the knowledge as well, and the behaviours. So we will sign off the educational aspect, but then our employers also do a trade test before they go. So as you would with any member of staff, there's a trade test on record as well. So it's double checked. So it's almost like a double quality to process. So we've got sort of different quality measures in terms of, you know, ultimately the employer has to sign that piece off, but any good practicing employer will always be doing a trade test before you put somebody on a screen, or you'll be doing a quality check, whatever they want to call it. But ultimately there's a quality check of practice before somebody goes on screen. And again, there's feedback. So I'm involved in the feedback that apprentices get. You know, I see the feedback from guests. So again, we can identify if there's a slip or a quality issue. There's feedback into the systems. So, and again, each time they visit us for technical skills as well as their knowledge, we're checking that knowledge and that deep dive and that embedding, because they're still
Yeah.
inexperienced at that point. So again, it's growing that skill set with different clients, different skin types, different personalities they might see, different medical conditions they might see, and how to operate with safely.
So, with the apprenticeship standards that currently exist in beauty and wellness, how do employers decide which level or route is right for their business?
Again, in conversation with their provider. So we've got from level 2 to level 5 submitted. We're waiting for a funding band to be allocated currently from the Secretary of State for the advanced skin rejuvenation specialist, which is a level 4 and 5. So we've got from level 2 entry point upwards. So we've got a level 2 beauty therapy that does include massage. So that's slightly different. The rationale for that was, within a level 2, therapists were doing massage within facials, manicures, pedicures, so on and so forth. So the only bit that was really missing was the torso. So that was added in again so that learners can develop. Yeah, because if you're trying to teach massage and then advanced massage in a level 3, where we all know it takes time to develop as a masseuse or a masseur. So it's that growth. So they get the basics, and then when they go on to level 3, they go on to the advanced. That is different to what currently happens in our FE counterpart provision, unless the college has decided to add that in, which some have because of the progression when they go on to maybe an apprenticeship at level 3. We have level 3 advanced beauty therapy, which is more electrical route. And then we have the wellbeing holistic therapy standard, which is more massage based and looks more around the holistic therapy. Also lifestyle profiling in there. So you're looking at a client with a 360-degree lifestyle profile. So you're looking at sleep patterns, diets, exercise, and how stress management fits into that. So that's a much more progressive way of doing the consultation than just a consultation. It's a 360 review of somebody's lifestyle, and then a treatment that carries on from that. So you've got the level 3 wellbeing holistic, level 3 advanced beauty therapy. You've also got a level 2 nail services apprenticeship that can be done, and there's just been a beauty consultant makeup consultant that has been retired. So again, there's work going on in the background about what that might look like going forward. And with all the proposals that are currently, we're in a bit of a sea change at the moment from the IFATE to Skills England and what the assessment reforms and things will look like. So lots of change, but there always is. It's never boring.
Keep things fresh.
Never boring.
So with a provider, they find a provider. So say obviously Armonia Academy, your business is a provider. They don't have to be in your area to be able to approach a provider.
No, I mean we deliver from, and so do other providers that we're aware of. So we deliver in England. We deliver from the boundary of Scotland to as far down as Cornwall, to where the Channel Tunnel is, east, north, south, west. So it very much depends on the provider's model. Some providers, as we say, come out, some providers have people in, some people have people attend 1 day a week. There's various models, but when you go on to the standard on the Skills England website, you can there's a little button and you can press to see who delivers that standard. So who are the providers? And it will tell you what their model is. So our model would say national. Somebody else's model would say 1 day a week, day release. Another one will say on site. So that's in their business. So there's a list of approved providers. And one thing that, for any apprenticeship that is valid as an apprenticeship, and again, there's some restrictions around language and what can be classed as an apprenticeship and what can't be classed as an apprenticeship. An apprenticeship provider has to be registered on something called the APAR register in England to be eligible to be able to do what we do, and they will also be Ofsted inspected in terms of that process. So again, if you've got people coming on as a sort of stepping stone from college or school or university, and you've got parents might want to who are these people that are an independent training provider, don't look like a college in the sense that we understand them to be. How do we find out if they are bona fide? Well, they go on to the APAR register and we're listed.
Right, brilliant. And then if with the therapist, employer finds the therapist, or can you provide therapists? Is it a
So
provider?
again, it's
How does that work?
well, we do get involved in a lot of the recruitment in terms of the processes that we operate, and again, most providers are involved in that process. It can be two-way. If you've got somebody in the business and you sort of know, you've had a member of staff who's, I don't know, diversed from housekeeping or food and beverage into this process, they still have to go through an eligibility process. So what we do with employers is they will fill what we call a vacancy template in. We upload that to the Department for Education. That gets approved, and that then gets put onto the National Apprenticeship Service website. So any person looking for an apprenticeship in any area, this is all apprenticeships, can go onto the National Apprenticeship Service website and see what vacancies are local to them in numerous industries. So they would apply direct through that link. That application comes directly to us as the provider. We then take the applicant through an information advice and guidance session, because they may fancy the idea of being a beauty therapist, but they might not really understand it. So we go through the nuts and bolts of how it works, what the commitment is, what the pay is, what the hours might be, what it would look like. And then they may progress that application further. So we've got eligibility checks to perform. There's usually an English and maths benchmarking exercise to check that somebody is able to progress forward, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of eligibility checks. Once that's then done, the way we do it is we then present them back to the employer for interview, and we do a dual interview with the employer. So it's quite rigorous in terms of making sure that people understand what our industry is about, because we're quite misunderstood in terms of what's required. And we spend quite a lot of time in that arena. But again, an employer can present somebody mutually, but we would still have to take them through the eligibility check. So the National Apprenticeship Service website is really critical for us as a provider to allow people to access through that route. So everybody goes through that route.
And then we touched on it at the beginning, but the funding side of it, I think everyone goes, right, great, this sounds good. How do I pay? What's the the cost? How do we pay for it? And I think often that can be the biggest blocker. You touched on it very briefly earlier on, but what are the funding options available to employers, including levy and non-levy payers?
Okay, so the employer pays the wages. So from day one, the employer is responsible for paying the wages of an apprentice. Obviously, that is in line with national minimum wage requirements, and they change as things move through. Employers can see that, and again, we'll guide and have conversations with people around that. If you have an apprentice who is under 25, you are not eligible to pay PAYE or national insurance. And if you have somebody who is under 19, then you will be eligible to an employer incentive, providing they are on programme at the trigger points of where that gets paid. And that's £1,000, which gets paid after the initial 90 days on programme and then 365 days on programme. If you have somebody and you start them on a lower wage than national minimum wage for their age, which you can, because an apprenticeship wage can be slightly less, then, and again, that's allowing for the income generation piece to grow. In terms of that process, then once somebody hits a year, they would then automatically go on to the rate of pay for national minimum wage for their age in any apprentice, and then that's any apprentice, doesn't even have to be in our sector. So in terms of paying for the tuition fees, they are paid by government. And all of this is in what we would call a service level agreement. So all of this is identified, what is the commitment? And then if there's any additional costs, so there are things that would be ineligible. So things like travel costs, if they're traveling, they can't be paid for by funding. If you're paying sustenance when they're out on the road or away, or you're doing, if people are sending them away somewhere, you can't claim that. You can't claim accommodation costs. So there are things that you can and cannot claim. It's very clear, but the tuition fees are paid in terms of the levy. So that's used by levy paying employers. If it's a non-levy paying employer, we secure the funds. Right. Currently, if you were to look at this as an employer, effectively, you've got 5% of your payroll budget that's been ring-fenced for apprenticeships and nothing else. And if you do not use it, it is taken back to the Treasury. And I just have a little bit of information for you. Post-COVID, the UK hospitality sector paid back £1.1 billion to the Treasury of unused levy spend.
No way. 1.1 billion?
Yes, that's the figures I've been provided. Obviously, we would need to double verify, but yeah, so there is levy that is ring fenced for apprenticeship provision and training that just goes back to government. And as of August 2026, if a levy payer does not use their levy, then it will go back to Treasury within 12 months. At the moment, it's within 2 years. People have now become much more apprenticeship aware. Be aware, because if, as we said, that's a 5% of your payroll training budget, which most training and learning development managers, if you were to say you're going to get 5% of your payroll to be able to spend on training and learning, then that's quite a big focus for a business. If you use all of your levy, you may have to make an employer contribution, but again, there's criteria that apply. So if they're a certain age, then you'll get 100% funding. So there are nuances within, but the bottom line is the government wants to support employers to support growth and training in their businesses. Therefore, that levy is the mechanism by which to do it. And if they're non-levy, we secure the funding on behalf of the employer. So they still have access, and the most they'll ever pay is a 5%. And that's changing. And again, depending on the age of the learner, if they are a care leaver, for example, if they have a special learning need, or, and we have a myriad of learning styles, people, with different accessibility requirements. There's criteria attached to everything to make everything more accessible for people to be able to progress along this journey.
Amazing. I mean, one of the things we've touched on, and I hadn't planned on saying it, but we've mooted the idea that maybe we need something like a spa manager's apprenticeship, don't we? Because spa managers aren't getting access to training because of the costs, or if there is training. And I think it's interesting when you said, which made me think we should talk about, 1.1 billion of hospitality levy hasn't been used. That could go into our industry at the management level if there wasn't it's in progress, we're talking about it, but that would support spa managers.
It will. What's always happened in the past is government have always directed us towards a generic management apprenticeship and qualifications. However, and also the policy at the moment.
Yes.
So policy at the moment is on pause, and there's also a huge piece of work looking at level 3 and below qualifications and apprenticeship standards, and also there's a huge neat agenda as in the younger, so they are retiring some higher level apprenticeship funding, so now you're not able to get a level 7 apprenticeship funded anymore, because they want to focus those funds on entry to employment. But again, that is a fantastic opportunity for our industry, because we're such an employer of youth. Youth come into our industry, they can start from 16, they can start from 17, 18, 19, 20. That's still young in my world now.
Yeah.
So, in terms of bringing people into the sector, and I know it's not ideal, and I know we probably have got a wish list that we would like, but we also need to work within the parameters of the policies that we have. And but it's still a missed opportunity if people are not using it. And if you were to say something, your government's going to give you, a levy paying, it's not free to them because they're paying into it, but it is their money. But if you're a non-levy paying organisation, the government is going to pay the tuition fees. And I don't think people always understand that.
Yeah, I think that's not clear. I think that's why I wanted it as a question, because people don't know that. They don't really realise that, yes, they pay a wage, but as you've said, they can already start earning straight away. People don't know what the funding is. They think they have to apply for it themselves. But as you've just said, you're the provider, you'll do all that for them.
We will help them to do that. They have to have a digital apprenticeship service account. If they don't have one when they start, we support them to do that. They can give us access rights to look after it for them. We can do it in combination. They can do it themselves. It very much depends on the size and scope of the business. But I go back to one of my original statements. They are there to run a business. We are there to help them run their apprenticeship provision. And so we take our role quite seriously. And I'm saying anybody else doesn't, but we really do get involved with the employer to try and make it as easy as possible, because their business is being in the business of running the business. We're the education provider. So our role is to help them navigate some of those areas that's probably not their bag. But they do want to use the mechanisms to be able to, to progress their business.
And so what are the other, obviously I mentioned the biggest, one of the biggest blockers I think I've heard is the funding, but what are the most common misconceptions employers do have about apprenticeships, and what do you wish more business owners understood before ruling them out as an option?
I think they think that the delivery requirements are on their shoulders. And I think they think they're going to have somebody that's going to be sat in a room that they're paying for, but they haven't got time for.
Mm.
And again, it's all in the planning. If the planning is effective, it builds. Yes, and also you've got to put time into any member of staff. I mean, I'm on record as saying, every job's an apprenticeship. There's very few of us walk into a job role and know everything that we need to do in that job role. So somewhere down that line, there is a mentor, there's a manager, there's somebody who's walked that path before, helping you and guiding you into the nuances of a workplace, policies, procedures, processes. How do I access that particular portal because I've not used that before? To me, that's a live apprenticeship. That's how an apprenticeship works. You learn by osmosis. So yes, you've got to give them some time off to do their technical piece and their qualification piece and their standard underneath. But absolutely, every day is a day of learning, right? So every day is a learning day. They're all cliches, but actually it's true. So I think there's this sort of, I don't know, this idea that it's going to take them away from running their business and it's not going to allow them to do all the things that we've talked about, the great things. And yes, you do have to give them time, but you have to give any member of staff time to develop. So, better that you be growing your own in the process that you're going through. Also, there's evidence and data to show that somebody who has done an apprenticeship with an employer is more likely to stay with that employer.
Mm.
Case in point, I've got somebody who started with me at 16 and they are still with me now into their mid 30s. They have progressed through the business. And they understand it from entry point of being an apprentice all the way through the business to now helping run the apprenticeship provision with other employers. So that's a great story. And we've got our training coordinator again started as an apprentice, so we do very much. And the reason I got involved in the apprenticeship piece again and back in education after I'd left to open a salon was because I couldn't find the people that I wanted in the mold that I wanted. So we trained our own through an apprenticeship. So we've been involved in apprenticeships for 25 years since I've had the business, and prior to that in my previous roles.
I mean, and I think actually what you touched on is really, really interesting. I think that sometimes the business owner or the spa manager thinks that the onus is on them to support the apprenticeship. But actually, what I've seen in the environments where I've done it, and I've done it in a couple of spas, it's actually your team really enjoy it. Like there's an element of nurturing and, look, I know the answer to this. Let me show you, let me help you. And actually, it's a really nice way of bringing your team together to
Also
support.
refreshing standards within your own team because
Yeah.
they're looking at what the apprentice is doing. And we've had some conversations where,
That
particularly where
too.
the wellbeing holistic therapy standard is concerned, because that's got the things in it that people have always done a CPD, that's now embedded in that apprenticeship. So the employers are kind of like, oh, well, hang on a minute. I've got an apprentice here who's getting this piece of information, but I've got members of the team who maybe didn't have that access then because it wasn't available, like the lifestyle profiling, for example, which looks at stress management, mental health, anxiety, all of those things that we're all dealing with on a day-by-day basis. And employers are doing that through, obviously, CPD. We've also got life-limiting and life-changing conditions is now embedded within an apprenticeship standard. So again, they are coming out ready trained with that knowledge, information and skill to welcome a myriad of clients, particularly oncology clients and people going through those journeys. So we look at the empathy, we look at how to speak to people who are in all different circumstances and situations in life, and that in itself is huge in terms of where our industry is at the moment, because the impact that we have on people's well-being and functionality and daily lives is huge, and that has been documented and again submitted to government to say there are things we can do to assist and help people feel better before we end up into a full-blown medical situation where support can be done. So I know there's a lot of work going on around the social prescribing piece and how we can help and support. But again, what we've tried to make sure is that all of that knowledge and skill is embedded into a mechanism that can be used to future-proof the industry, but also for the apprenticeship provision.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely more than just the therapist, the future therapist learning, isn't it? It's business,
Absolutely.
the other team members. And it is a whole journey, and I don't think people realize that that has a massive benefit. It's
Yeah.
not a shouldn't be seen as a, oh, you have to put time into this person. You know, like, oh, it's a actually it's do you know, you don't. Your team will really enjoy it. It will bring something new. It's a breath of fresh air to have. Yeah, you know, often your team might have been together a while. To have someone younger and new, often younger, you know, come in and bring that energy and stuff is really quite an incredible opportunity that I think
Our
apprenticeship.
oldest, just going to say, because we keep talking about young people and bringing people into the industry, our oldest apprentice on program is currently in their 40s. So there is no age. So I know it's an inherent thing, isn't it, that you
Yeah,
automatically go to that
you're
remit.
right.
They
Yeah.
often are younger, or they're somewhere between 16 and 24, 25, 26. But our oldest apprentice is actually in her 40s, and progressing great. And the other thing that I think, going back to the ask about what's the biggest thing that employers ask, I've often been asked is like, this all sounds a bit too good to be true. Where's the catch? And that has been said to me, and there's like, because it's a bit of a no-brainer as to why would you not do it. So where's the catch? There is no catch. There is no catch. It's have a conversation with your chosen provider. And also the other thing is we do a lot of work in the industry, as you know, Sarah. I talk about apprenticeships all the time, and nationally and internationally, in terms of where we want to get this for equity and parity across the nations. And we're trying really hard to get an apprenticeship in every nation that we work with throughout the UK. But equally, and we have you've got the framework in Wales. Scotland's on delay. Northern Ireland again hasn't happened yet, but as I know, Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, is pressing ahead with their apprenticeship, and I've been involved in that process as well. So it does work, and it's proven to work. So it's a kind of what's not to like.
And then looking ahead, I mean, you touched on the fact that you want to kind of take it out the apprenticeship that we have here in England and use it in other nations. But how are looking ahead beyond that? How are apprenticeships evolving to meet the better needs of a modern beauty and wellness business? You know, particularly around progression or commercial skills and long-term careers, because everything does evolve, doesn't it? And our
Absolutely.
apprenticeships.
Absolutely. And somebody who's a finisher completer and likes things in neat boxes, I don't understand why I ever ended up in education, really, because it evolves all the time, and business evolves all the time, and techniques and things change all the time. But in terms of the apprenticeship standards, they are written in a way that allows the flexibility and future proofing. So they're not prescriptive in terms of, for example, if we talk about thermal treatments, back in the day it was always hot stones. Well, now we use a myriad of application techniques. So it could be stones, it could be poultices, it could be bamboo, there's innumerate things it can be. There's flexibility in the way it's written, and that's why it's now called thermal rather than hot stones. So again, depending on what the employer uses, so we can have a room and we can have 5 or 6 different thermal direct application techniques being used in the room, because they're all with different employers. So when you look in the detail, there's flexibility built in so that it doesn't restrict an employer, because as I said at the beginning, everybody uses different brands, everybody has different protocols. So we had to have something broad enough to allow that flexibility and that future proofing, but narrow enough to regulate the level of standard. So it's quite complex. There is an occupational map on the Skills England website, because obviously the funding wise was predominantly talking about the English regime. And that has a functional map occupational map that goes from level through to level 7. The idea being that there's an apprenticeship standard all the way along. As I said, we're waiting for a funding band for the higher level skill set just now, but there is an arena change, which we know, which we're working our way through. We've also got the licensing piece that's coming in all nations. So we've got work going on in Scotland, we've got works already happened and applied in Wales, and the licensing scheme is progressing in England. So again, that is about the recognition of the professional status of our industry and what people have to learn, know and understand in order to do the job role. So there's some great opportunities, and that's the thing. I mean, I'm forever the optimist, which is good, and it's not for the faint-hearted in terms of that process of consistently reviewing, updating, making sure we're fit for purpose. But there is always a way to look at the standard and see how can that be used, if you like, for the benefit of the apprentice and the employer. So it's written in such a way that it is future-proofed. It's not restrictive.
That's
And
good.
also, I know one of the criticisms that the industry has currently got, because we keep talking about it, is about promotion and sales and people being aware of the broader commercial activity. And I wanted to share with you, which I will pull off correctly, so I say this correctly. But it's addressed in every kind of qualification that's ever written. So in Duty 11 of the Wellbeing Holistic Standard, and this is inherent throughout all the standards and also all educational programs, because the industry do that, and I sit on a number of industry boards, as you know. Duty 11, contribute to promoting the business, its products and services to drive business growth and client guest satisfaction. So that is a duty that is then underpinned by knowledge, skills and behaviours about sales, promotion, communication. So that is a very broad statement. How that then gets delivered is down to the curriculum provider, so the apprenticeship provider, and the business. So there is scope in there for people to do that. But again, it's understanding the content of what you've got, which your provider will absolutely, be excelled at in terms of how we deliver that program to make sure it's fully rounded.
Yeah, and that's interesting because you did touch a point there. It's often, do they learn do they learn retail skills at college? It's quite often a thing that is said when retail sales aren't great in the spa industry, that's because the colleges don't teach them. But what you've actually done then is
every qualification. So
yeah,
and in every observation or assessment process, whether it be whatever the qualification is, whatever the style of qualification, the mode of delivery, the mode of attendance, every treatment
it should be there.
a learner in any context has to give aftercare, home care, and also what would be the recommendations for a retail link. It either be service link to another service or treatment or protocol, or to a retail aspect. So that is in every single observation mechanism in every style of qualification that we have in the UK. And it's in the National Occupational Standards. So not quite sure where the disconnect is.
Yeah, but I think it's good that you say that because it's given as a reason, but that isn't the reason. We need to figure out what the reason is. And actually, I mean, I've even started it, and I could digress. I have almost started to think that sometimes we focus so heavily on that retail percentage, but actually there are other ways to make money in spa if you move your focus away from that 1% being your extra revenue generator. But I could go on and on and on about that. But
and
I think
if you're doing, I've always been of the view it kind of sells itself, because if you're doing your job properly and you're executing your role as you should in whichever level of role that is, it's naturally inherent. If we are servicing our client base and our guests correctly, it's an inherent piece of our job role to give recommendations, and it shouldn't feel like have you ticked a box and given a recommendation. It should feel like a natural flow and conversation, and stepping into other people's arenas that talk about that stuff. But it is very much, it's a natural inherent part of our role to want to the client or the guest to get the best longevity out of that treatment. And also, if it's a salon operation, or even within our spa operation, we have country club members, we have returning guests, we have returning people who want to continue that. So it's our job to do it properly and give them the right recommendation. You wouldn't go, and I know it's often been said, you wouldn't go to the dentist and expect the dentist not to talk about your teeth. Same as you wouldn't, come to a skincare expert and think that they've done the treatment and now it's finished. It's a continuum. So it's inherent in our job role, if we're doing it properly as thinking therapists, to give that service to that individual. And as a side fallout of that is they generally spend more, buy more, book more, and it works.
yeah, I think, we could go on about this conversation on the old retail side, but I think it is, like you say, it's part of the service. Your guest has not had a service, like you say, and you relate it back to the dentist. without giving that full piece of information, which is the treatment and the aftercare. Before we leave, is there anything you would like to say, or any information you provide, or anything that we've not touched on that you think we should cover before we finish?
Only really kind of a shout out to the fact that we've got National Apprenticeship Week that happens in England on the 9th of February every year. That's to celebrate all apprentices. There's a week of celebrations around employers, around providers, around learners, around access, around information. Obviously, you know, I am very happy to share any information that anybody would need to start that journey, inquire, you know, have more information. As you're aware, I kind of speak in many places to try and promote entry and sustainability within the sector as well. So, you know, we need to retain good people as well as bring people in. So absolutely, you know, we celebrate that on the 9th of February. We celebrate them every day. But that's a national call to action where it will be, you know, on the television, it will be, there's all kinds of road shows, all kinds of activities and promotion. If you have an apprentice, then shout out about it, you know, give the highlights. There are challenges, obviously, but that's the same with any member of staff that you might have in a team. They're no different. You know, they are human beings. We all have the same challenges and very different challenges throughout life. But it's an absolute gold star methodology of getting your team, growing your team, retaining your team, and recognising your team and giving something back to bring people into the industry, but also retain them in the industry.
Dan, what a great way to finish it, because it's bringing and retaining people in our amazing industry. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're so busy because you do have all of these other responsibilities with creating and helping to manage the standards, as well as Armonia Academy and being a provider. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today. Thank you so much.
It's an absolute pleasure, and it's an industry that has served me very well, and I want to share that with others to make sure that they get the same opportunities that I was, you know, lucky enough to experience. And it's taken me into places and allowed me to do things I never ever thought when I entered the industry as a youngster. So I'm really grateful to everybody that's helped me do what I do, and everybody that continues to help me to do what we do, because I am literally the conduit that moves this thing forward in certain places. But there are so many people. You know, it doesn't take a village. It takes a whole, you know, community. It takes a whole, you know, nation's worth of people pushing this agenda to make sure that we get the people and the recognition that we deserve.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Thank you.